We good? I thought we would look at the last verse in the Gita. It's got a couple of correlatives in it. Yatra and tatra in this case. So yatra means where, and then tatra means there. And so it's a common feature that you see in Sanskrit verses. It'll say yatra tatra or yata tata. As much this, then that much that. Wherever this, in that same place that. And so they make a connection between two ideas. And they create some kind of a relationship, usually a causal relationship, where one thing causes another. And so, it creates a causative relationship. So we have similar things in English. If then statements. If this, then there will be this. And so it's the same kind of idea. That's a conditional one. And so this could also be seen as conditional, but it creates a causative relationship where the presence of A then results in the automatic consequent presence of B. Do you follow this? If Amritanjali is cooking, then it's going to be a great meal. And so if this happens, then automatically that's going to happen. You follow? Does that make sense? That make sense? Okay. So the verse has that. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. Where there is Krishna, who is Yogeshwar, the master of yoga. Ishwar means master, or maybe the best translation of Ishwar into English might be controller, because Ish means to control. But maybe the best translation into English would be Lord. Because Lord can refer to, first of all, Lord indicates the person has a great deal of control. Like a judge is referred to in the Commonwealth as my Lord. You call judges in the U.S., you'll call them Your Honor, but in the Commonwealth, in England, and it's I don't know what the proper word is now. It's member states. They're no longer colonies, but they're member states. The Commonwealth is almost like a member state. It's the original member state before there was the EU, before there was NATO. There was the Commonwealth, where there was the British Crown, and then there were the countries that pledged fealty to the British Crown and consider themselves to be vassals of the British Crown. But I think at this point, terms like vassals or colonies or stuff like that are long since outdated. And so probably the best term would be member states. They've chosen to be a part. Like, I don't know if Australia is part of the Commonwealth. I'm not super up on things. But you're nodding your head yes? Okay, yeah. So they've chosen. They don't have to be a member of the Commonwealth. They could be their own country. And they are actually their own country, but they have some, I don't know what their relationship is. I think it's largely figurative at this point, to be honest. Australia has its own military and all sorts of things. But there is some interdependence between the two countries. They pledge allegiance to the Queen. Maybe she shows up on their money, stuff like that. Am I doing okay? That's about right. You don't even know all the details of the interconnectivity between Australia and England, right? But you know there's something. Yeah.
They share the same monarch. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the Bahamas, they share the same monarch.
They share the same monarch, but I don't know what that actually translates to in terms of real functional power or real functional anything. I'm not sure the Queen of England even has any serious power in England itself. I think it's largely a figurative title. So they share the same monarch. I don't know if that amounts to anything. That was what I was asking. In which case you didn't help us. So I think Ishwar might best be translated as Lord, because Ishwar is oftentimes used for God in the same way that the word Lord is oftentimes used as a title for God. But the term Lord in English gets used sometimes for very powerful people, and powerful means they have a high degree of control in a particular field. And so Yogeshwar means controller of, or master of, or lord of yoga. Which seems like a strange thing to call somebody. Maybe like it would indicate, at least if you don't know what I'm going to say about the word yoga, it would indicate that they're really good at doing pranayama, or they're really good at asana. They're a master of yoga. They can do a one-armed handstand. They can have an incredible back bend, and they can hold their breath and do pranayama for a long period of time. That would be, I'm going to argue for most people in this room, would be the only thing you guys would be able to come up with if I was to ask you, what does it mean to be a lord of yoga? Maybe you could say they were the originator of yoga. Maybe you guys might get sophisticated and think of that one. They were the originator of yoga. Of course, that's not what Yogeshwar necessarily means. It means you're the controller of, or you're the master of, you're the lord of. I guess you could say it's congruent with the idea of the origin of. But you could be the origin of something, and then, like Steve Jobs was the origin of Apple, and then it ran away from him for a number of years. And so just being the origin of something doesn't indicate that you have a degree of mastery over it. And in fact, you can be the master of something that you didn't start. So I don't think those two terms would be synonymous, lord of something and originator of something. Do you guys follow this? You could be Yoga Karana, the cause of yoga. You could be that. That would be the originator of yoga. But the word yoga, in addition to meaning connection or union or yogasana, the word yoga also means power. Can you close that door? Thank you. Yoga also means power, or even magic sometimes. And the words are connected. Yoga means union, and so yoga sometimes, yoga kshema, war and peace, yoga can mean war. Or yoga and kshema can be acquisition, because you unite yourself with the thing you want. And then protection, you keep the things you have, and you're able to get the things you want, so it can mean acquisition. And in that sense, if you can acquire things, you have power. And so that's how the words connect. But the word yoga also, in Sanskrit literature, oftentimes means power. So Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. Where there is Krishna, who is omnipotent. Might be it's not a literal translation, but it's functionally what's being communicated by the verse. Where there is Krishna, who's omnipotent. Yatra Parto Dhanurdhara. Where there is Arjuna, the holder of the bow. Where Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partha Dhanurdhara. Where there's Krishna, the omnipotent one. Where there is Arjun, the holder of the bow. Tatra. In that place. Yatra Tatra. If this, then that. Where there's this, there's that. It's less common in English for someone to say, where there is this, there is that. It's very common in English to say, if you have this, then you have that. If-then statements are extremely common. Conditional statements in English, which is what this actually is, a conditional statement. Indicating causation. Indicating causation. where there is the omnipotent one, where there is accompanied by his devotee, Arjuna in this case, then there will be Shri Vijaya Bhuti Dhruva Niti. There will be Shri. Shri means, what do you guys think Shri means? Wealth. I think that'll be the primary meaning of Shri. Opulence, yes, also. But we've got the word bhuti in there, which also means opulence. So you got to pick. When you get these words, which some of their meanings overlap, then you got to pick discrete meanings, lest the words become mere synonyms for one another. So although opulence is cool for Shri, wealth is better because bhuti more readily means opulence. What else does Shri mean? Beauty, that's right. Beauty. And that could also be a meaning that you find in this verse. It fits a little less well. I mean, beauty in the grandest sense of beauty. There will be beautiful outcomes. There will be beatification. There'll be like stuff like that, big concepts of beauty. You have a bunch of words in Spanish for beauty too. Hermoso, lindo, guapo. You get a bunch of different words. Some words like guapo mean handsome or good looking. And then lindo literally means clean. But it's like you can imagine someone goes, hey, how's she look? And you go, she's clean. It's very clear what you're attempting to communicate with that. But literally it means clean. But in context it means hot. And then hermoso. You speak Spanish, right? Hermoso is a grander sense of beauty in Spanish, where you could say that the sunset was very beautiful. And you could say it was hermoso. Or you could say the forest was hermoso. But you wouldn't say that it was guapo or lindo, right? And so hermoso in Spanish carries the same idea of beauty, but in a very, very broad way that goes beyond one's physical appearance. And so certainly if you took that in meaning of beauty, it could work. But I think contextually wealth is probably the best fit. And Shri, beauty and wealth, those are both really standard definitions. Opulence maybe is next in line, but those two, I would, if I had to pick two that were the big two, those would be the two. And I would say that most probably wealth is your best one, given what we're talking about. It's the end of the Gita. But I don't think we could very easily understand beauty in this grand way, and then it would also be appropriate. Tatra, in that place there will be Shri, Vijaya. Vijaya means victory. Bhuti. Bhuti literally means like beingness. But what it means is it means opulence, power, success. Dhruva Niti. Dhruva means fixed, certain. Niti, morality, ethics. Or Dhruva could be applied to the whole thing and say, certainly there will also be all these items. So you can either make Dhruva a adjective, modifying the word niti, which means ethics or morality, in which case it means there will be certain ethics, there'll be great ethics, or it's modifying the whole thing, in which case it means certainly there will be Shri, Bhuti, Vijaya, and Niti. There'll be ethics or morality, there will be power or opulence, There'll be victory, success, and there will be wealth. Matir Mama. That is my opinion. So the speaker of the Gita, in this case Sanjaya, not Krishna, Sanjaya speaking. And Sanjaya says, Matir Mama. That is my opinion. That's my thought. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, where there's Krishna, the omnipotent one. Yatra Partha Dhanurdhara, where there is Arjuna, the holder of the bow. Tatra, in that very place, there will be Shri Vijaya Bhuti Dhruva Niti. There will be wealth, victory, opulence or power, and great morality. Matir Mama. That's my opinion. So I wanted to look at this verse in a specific way today. One thing is devotees in general don't like verses like this because we love Krishna just because, and we don't need any reward. And if you love somebody, imagine if you cared about somebody, like Rakta did a favor for a friend the other week or month, and his friend transferred $1,000 into his bank account and said, "Hey, I want to say thank you for the favor you did me." And he sent $1,000. And Rakta was offended. I said, "What are you doing? I'm your friend. I counseled you through a difficult time. I'm insulted that you're trying to pay me off for doing this." It's, first of all, it's condescending. Like you're giving me some kind of, there's dakshina, oftentimes it's pronounced dakshin, which has a totally different meaning in Sanskrit. But there's dakshina, when you give somebody a donation, very respectfully. And then there's bakshish, when you give somebody like a tip. And so if you tip somebody, it's kind of insulting if they're not in a relationship with you where tipping is appropriate. I guess somebody says hi to you and you go, "Oh, let me give you a tip for that." Now, of course, most people are such money grubbers in this country. You're like, "Yeah, give me a tip. Sure. Sounds great." But in a cultured place, tipping people who are your friends or your equals, what to speak of your superiors, is considered insulting. And so if you offer somebody money who's above you in the cosmic hierarchy and you do it disrespectfully, generally speaking, the person will go, "It's okay, you keep your money. It's all right. It's okay if you keep it. It has to be given in the right mood." This is very common in civilized places in the world. It's so common as it would be strange for the person to accept money if it wasn't given respectfully. Also, it's a weird thing. If you go to a shop owner in India and you're not respectful, a lot of times they'll say, "Yeah, please go somewhere else." Like they'll just tell you not to come to their shop. It's the opposite of the American, the customer is always right mentality. There's a little bit of an attitude of, "You're lucky to be shopping at my shop and I'm happy to let you go and I'm super zen about the whole thing, and if you give me an attitude at all, in any way, shape, or form, I'm ready to just shut my door to you." Right? It's interesting, isn't it? It's so different. It's so different than... Anyway, so devotees don't like to be tipped for their love for Krishna. And so, in general, verses like this are unnecessary for devotees. Now you can modify the verse, which we're not going to do today, and you can understand it that the beauty here means a beautiful outcome of love of Krishna. The wealth here means the wealth of love of Krishna. The victory here means a victory over your senses. A victory over the obstacles to devotional service. Bhuti means the power to bring Krishna under one's control and enter into an intimate relationship with the divine. And niti, ethics, means the principle that I'll do whatever is favorable for my spiritual life and I'll reject whatever is unfavorable. And so you can easily morph the verse a little bit and make it tasty for advanced spiritualists. And certainly our commentators do that. That wasn't what I wanted to talk about today either. I want to talk about this. I think in a lot of ways this verse is very close to a definition of faith. Now, if we get into a clean definition of faith, we have a clean definition of faith. Shraddha Shabde Bishwas Kahe Sudridha Nischoy Krishna Bhakti Hoila Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. The word Shraddha in Sanskrit means that place where you put your heart. Shrad means your heart, and Da means where you place. Now, interesting, the word Shrad is just because we're going through the verse in some detail. We're going through these verses in a little bit of detail. This will probably be relishable for very few of you, but just for the sake of completeness. The word Shrad never occurs in any Sanskrit literature to mean heart, ever. It doesn't exist. But about 2,500 years ago, one of the commentators said the word Shraddha means, Da means to place, and Shrad, he says, in this case means heart. And so this definition that Shraddha is where you place your heart only exists in one grammatical commentary from about 2,500 years ago. And you would expect if the word Shrad meant heart, and therefore the word Shraddha meant to place your heart, you would find the word Shrad occurring all over the place. But in fact, you find the word Shrad, meaning heart, occurring nowhere in Sanskrit literature. The word Shrad has no meaning in Sanskrit literature. But sometimes when there's a word with an enigmatic origin, then commentators will drop something in. You don't know where it comes from, but some commentators, sometimes thousands of years ago, will drop in, here's where it comes from, and you kind of, it's a take it or leave it type thing, because there's no earlier comment, there's nothing earlier, there's nothing later, there's no way to cross-check. It's just that lone comment, but it's a long, long time ago in an authoritative grammatical manual, and so that's just what you're left with. So that's the best we can come up with. Shraddha, where you place your heart. Shraddha Shabde, the word Shraddha. Bishwas Sudridha Nischoy. It means, and this is, when you get into a definition, it includes the word that's being defined, and it includes other words which convey the meaning. So Bishwas in Sanskrit also means faith. So faith is faith in, but it's a different word for faith. You follow? So you could say, love is affection. Love is extreme affection. The word affection in many ways is a synonym for love. You might have to look up what the word affection means. And so if you're trying to, it's a positive emotion, a positive feeling towards somebody else. It involves attachment and well-wishing feelings. If you want to really define love, you might have to spend several paragraphs in English. The word affection by itself doesn't fully give you what you want because it's in some ways a synonym. Did you guys follow that? This is a problem you run into in dictionaries. Usually they'll have at least a couple of degrees of separation. So you'll look up love and they'll say affection. If you look up affection, it won't say love. They're smart enough. The affection will have another word, right? Like, extreme, I don't know, favorable disposition. And then, then you look that up and then that might revert back to love. But usually they'll try and keep at least a couple degrees of separation. So you don't look up one word, then you look up the other word and it says that word, and you're left in a closed system and there's no way to enter into it. So the word faith means the certain conviction. Nischoy means definitive. The definitive conviction. The definitive conviction what? Krishna Bhakti Hoila Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. That where there will be Krishna Bhakti, it's the same idea of conditional. Where there will be Krishna Bhakti, when there will be Krishna Bhakti, if there is Krishna Bhakti, then all of your duties are accomplished. Sarva karma krita hoy. All important acts, everything necessary to do in life has been done. Usually, in English, we define the word faith as belief in a higher power. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that's a type of faith. I don't think that's wrong. Our definition of faith presupposes a belief in a higher power. And it would be, in this sense, a more intermediate definition of faith. Because you could believe in a higher power and then do nothing about it. Like, you could be, for instance, a murderer or a rapist or a child molester, and you could officially believe in God or be a Catholic or a Christian or whatever. But it could have no impact on your life. And so a lot of times we think of faith as this belief thing. We think of faith as being orthodoxy, a proper belief. Doxos means belief. Not necessarily the same as orthopraxy, a proper practice. And we distill or separate faith from action. And faith becomes a mindset or a belief system that doesn't necessarily have to play out into your practical actions. Do you guys follow this? This gets addressed in the Bible, in the book of James, in the 2nd chapter. James says faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Because if you just pay such lip service to the idea of faith, but there's no practical manifestation of it, that faith is at the very best impotent, and at the very worst it's non-existent and deceitful, conniving, self-serving. So our definition of faith is not the same as most of the time. Of course, you can use faith in a secular sense. You have trust in something. I have faith that door will open when I turn the handle. I have faith the meal's going to be good tonight. There's a sense of trusting, and a voluntary sense of trusting where the trustee puts faith in the trustor, and then allows the trustor to take responsibility for some aspect of the trustee's life. And so faith becomes trust. In a religious sense, faith is belief in a higher power, a divinity. When we define faith in this verse 4 centuries ago, it was an intermediate definition. It presupposed that you had faith in a higher power, and then it talked about what you do with that. And our definition of faith is almost the same as this statement from the Gita. Do you see how they're connected? Raise your hand. Nobody else? How are these two verses connected to one another? What do you got?
Well, I'm thinking of the term leap of faith because you don't know for sure that you're going to get something until you take that leap, and then you get it. So
That's a nice point. That wasn't what I was thinking of, but that's a good point. Arjuna is being asked to have faith in this, or the reader is being asked to have faith in it, and then the verse is also asking you to take a leap of faith and have that faith. That wasn't what I was thinking of. But that's a nice point. It's a nice connection between the two. Yeah?
In the Bhagavad Gita verse, it says where there's Krishna and Arjuna. I think that's parallel to this statement that where there's Krishna Bhakti, because where Arjuna is there, Krishna is there, certainly Krishna Bhakti between them.
Yeah, you were almost there, but then you skipped it. You said half it, and I was like, oh, she got it. And then you just didn't finish the sentence. You're like, then 2 + 2 equals. That's how I'm feeling right now. It's okay. You left me hanging, yeah.
Between Arjuna and Krishna, there's bhakti, and so there's everything you could ever want and need, and it's the same thing in your faith where all your duties are.
How come you didn't complete the sentence? How come you didn't say what he said? I didn't hear you say it. You covered your mouth and mumbled at me. I don't know how I'm supposed to make sense of that. What were you saying?
I was saying that
You were saying there's a relationship of bhakti, but you didn't say there will be everything you could ever want in life. You said there'll be bhakti. But the verse is, where there's bhakti, there will be a completion of everything that was required to do in life. You said there will be bhakti. The verse is, where there is bhakti, Krishna bhakti hoila, when there's Krishna bhakti, sarva karma krita hoy, all karmas have been accomplished. You didn't say that part. He did. You didn't say the same thing. Do you see how you stopped short? Where there is bhakti, there is bhakti, is what you said. Yeah, you noticed what she didn't say it, right? You see what I noticed? You see it?
No.
Let me say it again. Let me say what they said, maybe a little more clearly and elaborately. This verse in the Gita, in many ways, is a call to have faith. If you believe that when you get right with Krishna, everything you need in life will be provided. If you believe that, let's take faith here as belief. If you believe that if you get right with Krishna, if you connect with Krishna, if you are a devotee, if you chant your rounds and follow the principles, if you do service, if you make Krishna the center of your life, if you invoke Krishna's presence by making him the center of your life, if you believe that, and if you believe that as a result of doing that, you will achieve everything you could ever want and more, and there will be no stone left unturned, and everything you require in your life that you might want, that you might need, will be accomplished. And those things that aren't accomplished, you didn't actually need them. If you have that level of trust, if you have that level of faith in Krishna, in the power of a connection with divinity, if you value, and this is a very important transition here, if you value your connection to divinity above all other things, and think it is the only truly necessary thing that you have to accomplish in your life, and that everything else will take care of itself, the result of believing that is that you will live the life of a devotee in your heart, in your mind, with your actions. You will be empowered to do the right thing because you value that thing as being the most important thing. I'm watching the last 6 Star Wars movies. For some reason, I'm on a kick. I think Madhuri got me into it. I can't remember, but I think what it really was I got sucked into The Mandalorian and Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I was like, oh God, I got to watch these ones. I hated all the new Star Wars movies. I grew up, the original Star Wars came out in 1977. Empire Strikes Back came out, I believe it was 1979, perhaps it was 1980. And then Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. So I was 5 years old when the original Star Wars movie came out, and I was 11 when Return of the Jedi came out. So the original trilogy, I literally grew up with from my earliest memories. Went to the movie theater, remember being in the movie theater, remember being scared out of my skull, bought the action figures, was totally into it. I was old enough by the time the Ewoks came out that I thought they were lame. Cheesy. Because the first 2 Star Wars movies weren't fun. They weren't kid-friendly. They were kind of gnarly. Like Darth Vader was strangling people to death in the first 2 minutes of it. It was heavy. You were freaked out. It was like freaky. It wasn't Ewoks and Jar Jar Binks and stuff like that. And people were getting killed left and right. Like every time there was like a bar scene, a bunch of people died. And I don't want to segue too much into and I don't even know why I brought this up in the first place. Oh, Anakin's descent to the dark side and his becoming Darth Vader was ultimately caused by his overattachment to Padme, his secret wife. I mean, he was already a failed sannyasi, became a Jedi and then got married in secret. So he like lost all my respect. People thought that was romantic. I was like, this poor sod. I've lost all my respect for him. He's a sannyasi and then he got married. So I just... The Jedis have a vow of celibacy, and then he went and got married in secret and got her pregnant. It's just like totally low class in my book. Lost all respect for the man. Plus, I thought he looked kind of dorky. That flat top he was rocking, I thought looked kind of dorky. I wasn't feeling it at all. But he got so attached to his girl, and he wanted to save her from death. And you know, the irony of the whole thing was he killed her by his attachment. But he gave up his caste. He gave up his dignity. He gave up his tribe and his value system and his ethics and went against everything he believed in. Why? Because he valued that. Of course, all the girls were like, oh my God, it was so romantic. And I was just trying not to vomit. I was like, no, don't do it. No, stop. One time Prabhupada was on a plane and they were showing a movie. It was back in the day where you didn't have a personal movie screen in front of you. They had a massive movie screen at the front of your cabin. So you're sort of forced to watch the movie. And Prabhupada was chanting, but there was a war movie, like a precursor to Rambo, whatever it was in the 70s. And Prabhupada looked at his disciples and said, will he not die already? Because he was going through a 25-minute war scene. He was getting shot at. And Prabhupada just found it to be totally unrealistic. Anyway, it was very clear. He valued his girlfriend, his wife, more than he valued his spirituality. They weren't congruent. They became oppositional. And he sacrificed one for the other. For most of us, we'll never have this problem. You find a decent spouse and they help you with your spiritual life. But in this case, they were antagonistic to one another. His attachment was antagonistic. And it led to a breach of his morality and integrity. And why did he do that? Because he valued that human above his connection to, in this case, the force, sort of a I don't know what it was. It's kind of like panpsychism, if you guys know what that term is. It wasn't really impersonalism, because the mitochondria, or whatever they call them, that's actually a word, but metachlorines, thank you, sorry, I messed up. I switched out for an actual term from biology. But the metachlorines are this real thing, this real physical thing. And so it's similar to the now extinct philosophy of panpsychism, where everything has a certain degree of consciousness within it that you can tap into. You can Google that if you want to later. It's an interesting philosophical school of thought that lost favor about a century ago. And so he valued the girl over that, his attachment to their form of divinity. And because he valued that human, that person, that romantic relationship, then he sacrificed all of his values and gave up his tradition and fell from his sannyas and gave up his vows and turned on his gurus and turned on his tribe and killed a bunch of children too. It was really nasty. It got really bad. This verse is about the positive side of that. If you really value Krishna, then the rest of your life falls right into place. And what does it mean to value Krishna? It means not just that you believe Krishna exists, but you actually believe, if I'm a devotee, if I do right by Krishna, if I connect with Krishna, that's all that ultimately matters in my life, and my life is a success. If you believe that in our tradition, you have faith. Our definition's a little bit more severe. We ask a little more of people. You can't say I have faith and then do any damn nonsense. We can look at your actions and see if they match up to your protestations, your statements about faith, and we can determine whether that's a crippled, impoverished, impotent type of faith or whether it's real faith. Real faith changes your life. And so the original the verse, not this verse, but the definition of faith verse. Faith is when you're completely convinced that if I just serve Krishna, I've done everything I need to do in this lifetime. I am a smashing success. I have won the game of life. If I die penniless, if I die anonymous, if nobody remembers my name, if I leave no legacy but I connected to Krishna, I am a smashing success. My life is a success. My existence is a success. I'm happy. I won. And this verse is pushing. You can read it in a bunch of different ways. You can read it in a materialistic way, but I'll worship Krishna and get all those things. You can read it in a devotee way of, no, there's material things we don't want, but Krishna means a spiritual thing you'll get, stuff that we don't hate. The wealth of love of God. But I'm seeing this verse tonight, as we're discussing it, as a call to action. The verse is a challenge. That why are you wasting your time running after things in the material world? Don't you know if you've got Krishna, you've got everything? Don't you know that's what you should be focused on? And I see this verse as a challenge and a call to action from the reader. Where there's Krishna, there will be everything you could ever want. Why are you looking for those things separately? Why are you looking for those things independently? Why don't you value Krishna sufficiently? Why haven't you understood the basic lesson of the entire text, which is that if you have Krishna, you have everything. It's the one in front of all the zeros, and without that, it's just a bunch of zeros. Does that make sense now? The connection between the two verses? So I was just thinking about this. Again, you can read the verse, and if you're materialistic, it gives you some encouragement. You can read the verse in a more spiritual sense and redefine what these terms mean. And instead of thinking lindo, you start thinking hermoso. That's also okay. But you can also read this verse as a challenge. Do you believe? And I'm asking you this question now. It's not rhetorical. You don't have to answer. But you answer for yourself. Do you believe if you love Krishna and make Krishna smile and connect with Krishna, and that is all you ever accomplish in your life? You do nothing more. You chant really good japa. You're a good devotee, but you fail at every material thing you do. You never get married. You never have kids. You're working minimum wage jobs forever. Living hand to mouth. In a studio, not even a one bedroom. A room in somebody else's house. You go bald at an early age. You never make it to the gym. You're just kind of skinny fat for the rest of your life. Never get your teeth fixed. Never get a really cool aesthetic going. Don't get really good at any of your hobbies. But you love Krishna. And you have an intimate, romantic even, relationship with the divine. Is that a good life? Or would you be bummed? Your answer to that question tells you where you're at on the spectrum of faith from our tradition's point of view. I don't believe in balance because I don't equally weight everything in life. I think Krishna is infinitely more important than everything else, and I think everybody should get right with Krishna and lash themselves to Krishna, tether themselves to Krishna. You know when you lash something together, you know what that means? When you lash something together, you know what it means? You might have two sticks and you have no way to connect them together with a screw or something like that, like a 2x4 and another 2x4. Normally you use a screw or nails to connect them together and form joints. But in the days before screws and nails, how did they create joints between two pieces of wood?
Ropes.
They lashed them together with ropes. And they tied semi-complicated knots that would give structural support to two items. That's how the scaffolding you see, like in Southeast Asia, they do the bamboo scaffolding, where you're thinking, how is it humanly possible these guys are working 10 stories up on this flimsy bamboo scaffolding? You know what I'm talking about? It's crazy. Like, I would not go up that if you paid me $1 million. It's insane. And they're up there like wiping down windows or something like that. Those are lashed together. They're tied together with rope. We need to lash ourselves to Krishna really tightly. And then whatever you can, once you're lashed to Krishna here, so you're completely tied to Krishna here, then whatever you can easily reach out and grab, you're welcome to. I'm not against all that stuff that's out there. Just as long as you've got this like kung fu grip here. There's none of this. I'm balanced. Because it's an insult to Krishna to think Krishna's as important as anything else. Like imagine if, you ran over a little kid on the street and then you said, "Oh, but I avoided running into the tree." So, it's always one thing or another. You can never have it all. I saved the tree. Or I saved the fence. Didn't run into the fence. I hit your kid, but I didn't hit your fence. Your kid was playing outside. I ran in there. I hit your kid, but I managed to avoid your fence. I was balanced. I was trying to do both, but I couldn't. Hit your kid a little bit, maybe hit the fence a little bit. Hit him each 50-50. People wouldn't be happy. You balance when both things are of equal importance. When both things are not of equal importance, then you choose. And so I see this verse being a call to action for us. That you should know that everything you think is important in life is nothing compared to Krishna. He's the origin of all that. There's a nursery rhyme. It's like, you might want a house or a dog or a cat, but why not love Krishna who made all of that? It's a very simple message. That's the simple message the verse is trying to communicate. It's trying to instill in you faith that these things are not things to be sought after. These things are derivative. These things are secondary. These things are automatic. These things are auxiliary. These things are less important. These things are not primary. Busy yourself with what's important. And so I see in this verse, thousands of years earlier, a very similar definition of faith as given in one of our core texts. That faith is the complete conviction that if I just do one thing in life, I just serve Krishna, I've been a complete success. So it's not that if you worship Krishna, then you'll get all these things. If you worship Krishna, Krishna himself is all of these things. You have all those things in their purest, most original, most beautiful, most pure form. Did you guys follow what I just did? I doubt it. So I'm going to explain it to you. Listen carefully, if only for this little bit. Remember how I said you can interpret the verse as if you worship Krishna, then you'll win a victory in battle and get a bunch of money and get the girl and be real powerful? Or the guy. Flip it. And then the other one is you could alter the meaning and say, no, you'll get the wealth of love of God, and you'll get the wealth of this and the this and that and the other thing. And that's a modification of the verse and maybe straying from its original meaning, but it makes it more favorable for devotees. What I just said now attempted to reconcile those two positions. If you have Krishna, who's the origin of everything beautiful, and the word Krishna literally means the all-attractive one, you are now have an intimate relationship with the most beautiful person who's ever existed. In fact, all beautiful things you see in this world, Mat Angsena Teja Sambhavan. I'm mixing two verses together. No, not that one. The verse before it. You don't know it? Come on, man. Yeah. Keep going. Come on, dude. Get there. I'm looking it up. Get there before me. Yat vibhuti mat sattvam Srimad urjitam eva vat tat tat eva ava gachatvam mama teja angsa sambhavan. Yat vibhuti mat. It's the same thing with the correlatives. Yat, whatever. Vibhuti mat sattvam. Whatever you see in this world has amazing existence. Vibhuti. It's like powerful. Sattvam, in existence. Srimad urjitam eva vat. It's Srimad urjita. It's powerful. It's beautiful. It's opulent. Tat, that thing. Eva ava gachatvam. You must know that thing, mama teja angsa sambhavan, comes from the spark of my splendor. So the verse is arguing that if you have Krishna, not if you have Krishna, then you'll get these things. If you have Krishna, you have all those things because Krishna is what all those things are a part of. They're beautiful and they're amazing because they're a little part of Krishna. Krishna is actually the most beautiful person in the world, the most amazing person in the world, the most loving person in the world. He's the person you're always looking for. You're looking for it in that girl or that guy or that job or that accolade or that whatever, but you're never going to be satisfied with that because Krishna is what your heart's crying for. And so it's not that if you have this, then you have that, meaning you're going to go from point A to point Q. Not that. If you have Krishna, you've already got the whole alphabet because Krishna is everything you could ever want and more. And so focus on that, and then whatever you get in life, fair enough. Fair play. No problem. Reach out a little bit. See what you can get. No problem. But don't let go. That's what it means to be a devotee. And you don't have to be there today, but you should know that's what it means to be a devotee, and you should aspire for being there. And it wouldn't make sense if you were there in 6 months. In fact, I wouldn't trust you if you're like, yeah, I fully get that in 6 months. I'd know that you were a liar or delusional or both. And if you're delusional, you're functionally a liar. You're just a sincere liar who still can't be trusted. But we should understand this is what it means to be a devotee. This is the path I'm embarking on. The real hero's journey. the path where I'm really searching for one lost love. My whole life is that search. I've got my eye on one thing. I never really take it off. I'll dabble, but I'm taking the master's course in one subject. I value it above everything else. I'll live for it, I'll die for it, and everything in between. This is who I am. This is what it means to be a devotee. This is my saga. This is my hero's journey. That's what we're trying to get to. Even if you're not there, at least you know what Mount Everest looks like. At least you know what it means to be a devotee. It's a high thing, not a low thing. It's a big deal. It's something, it's the greatest journey, the most adventurous journey, the most profound journey, the most exciting, the most romantic journey. You talk to a devotee, they're the most romantic. Their whole life is a love affair with Krishna. One time, some of our texts they court bards, really, is what they were. They were bards. They were court writers, authors who were sponsored by the kings. And they would write romantic stuff glorifying the kings and their queens. But they would do so externally, but a lot of the works would have a double entendre, where they would also be talking about their love for Krishna in romantic terms. And so they would satisfy their patrons, but then they were also writing religious literature, and it could be understood on either level. Did you follow that? So it was really literature. It seemed to be about romantic life and the king and queen and their great romantic affairs, but it was really about Krishna and the devotees and the love between them. And so Prabhupada was talking to a scholar in Boston in 1967, 68. And the scholar was translating one of these texts into English. And he said to Prabhupada, he said, "You're a sannyasi, you're celibate. How can you appreciate the richness of this text?" Meaning, unless you have experience in romance and sex and all the ins and outs of that, you won't be able to appreciate the nuance of the text. Prabhupada says you don't get it only by being celibate. Can you understand the richness of this text? Otherwise, you can't enter into it. Because the book is ultimately about Krishna and the intimacy of the love between the soul and God. Did you guys follow that? Devotees are the most romantic people. They're in love with Krishna. They got a fire that burns in their heart that never goes out. Krishna never gets old. Krishna's fresh every day. They're falling in love every day like it's day one. Their anticipation grows over decades, over a lifetime. They'll be 80 and they'll sound like a giddy schoolgirl when they talk about Krishna. And unlike the selfish mutual exploitation that goes on in the name of love in this world, the flavor of their love is ambrosial and selfless and pure and sweet and magical and inspirational and unbelievably attractive. Being a devotee means wrapping your mind around these kind of concepts and then moving towards that goal. Thank you, IGTV. What thoughts do you guys have about what I said?